Got very similar questions from Simon and Martin. Sorry, Simon Nuttall and Martin Lucas-Smith. So, Simon, if you go first, you may cover Mike's question as well. Maybe different question, Phil.
Hello, yes, my name is Simon Nuttall, and I am a resident of Thoday Street in Romsey. In September, following requests from several residents, a trial of cycle racks was begun at 2 locations in Thoday Street. I am very grateful to councillors for supporting and arranging that experiment. I'd now like to request a full officers' report on the consultation exercise. Only a brief summary of the results has been circulated, and I've put copies on the councillors' desks on the table. This shows that of the 31 respondents, a slight majority were in support of the idea. But I think that a consultation of this nature deserves a full officers' report. There were many comments about the design and the location of the racks, and it is normal practice that officers supply a recommendation. So the question I have for you tonight is, will councillors support the production of a full officers' report to properly complete the consultation exercise?
Councillor Boyle.
Personally, I would support Simon's request. I think this is possibly the kind of thing that would have gone to the Area Joint Committee in the past, before it was abolished, and it's supposed to have been reinstated. Some 6 months ago or so, a motion was passed at County Council effectively calling for it to be reinstated, so it should have been by now, and I know that a number of councillors are trying to make that happen. I think it's very useful, it would be very useful to have a report simply to bring a bit more clarity to where we get to. I agree that the consultation has been a bit messy. I looked at the responses. I've received names and addresses. I found that a number of the respondents didn't live in the area. A couple of them were counted twice. And also there's the fact that a petition against the proposal was included, which obviously skewed the sample slightly against the proposal. So what I'm proposing to do is to go out and to do a knock and drop, which always generates a far higher response rate from members of the public, only a relatively small sample, in my opinion, of the actual number of people who live in the affected properties responded to this consultation. If we knock on their doors and ask them to fill it in there and then, and to put it in their letterbox sticking out and then walk around in an hour and gather the responses, we'll have a much more representative sample. Personally, I don't want to predict what the outcome would be. I said that we would do a proper consultation, see what the results were, and make a decision then. I think we do need more cycle parking in the city if we're to encourage people, to encourage modal shift away from the use of private motor vehicles. At the same time, I have spoken to a number of people who are very keen cyclists, who live on the terraces, who have said that they're able to park their bikes in their back garden where they're more secure than if they were on the street, and that Romsey has, its terraces have the lowest amount of parking space available compared to pretty much any other area of the city, so they feel that it needs to be more context sensitive. I'm not saying that I agree with them, I'm just saying I think we need a better consultation, better evidence, and let's have a report, so it can all be above board and clear. Thank you.
Councillor McGuinness.
Thank you, Chair. So it was quite a while ago when residents had contacted me with this idea, particularly where some of these residents have given up their cars to try and make them their families sort of all using bicycles, and I think there's real issues. I'm very for trying to promote Cambridge as the cycling city, which I think its reputation, not just within this country, but sort of internationally, we're meant to be a cycling city. And I'm always amazed myself with some of the problems, actually, that as a cyclist and a car user that we have in the city. With regards to this issue, I'm very happy to go back to officers to get a fuller report for you. And if I can make sure I've got your details, I'll make sure that comes directly to you. And with Councillor Bork, in terms of ensuring that the doors are all knocked on within Thoday Street, I regularly go out or certainly someone in my team, we're door knocking at least every other week. And so happy to try and actually target this where, as you say, the survey is coming up. I think when we spoke last at East Area, it's very sort of 50-50 with responses for and against. So I think we'll leave it at that at the moment. As I say, very happy to go back to officers, make sure that we're up to date, that there's a fuller report. I'm very for that, and also to follow this through, because I think I'm certainly very, very pro having more cycling provision, cycling racks. Thank you.
I think Councillor Saunders wanted to respond to your first question, Simon, so I'll let him come in.
Yeah, thanks. Firstly, just for the record, I'm a member of the cycling campaign, so you might expect me to have views on this, but it is in fact a very difficult subject. One of the problems is, and why we should look at it further, is that it affects people not just who live in the street, who use the street, people who use the thin paths to go to and from Mill Road, for example, who might be with buggies or in wheelchairs, find anything parked on the pavement quite tricky. So if you could do anything to get things off the pavements, away from the front of the houses, that would be quite useful.
Yes, so I'll come back, then I'll let Noel come in after that.
Okay, yes, thank you. Yes, in answer to Councillor Burke's responses about doing further consultation work, actually there were 31 responses received of the initial consultation from the about 80 houses in the affected section of the street. This is a response rate of about 40%, which I think is rather healthy for that type of consultation. It would be very hard for anyone who's concerned about the street environment not to be aware that there was a cycle parking trial, because there were 2 racks and there were big yellow signs next to them for 2 weeks, and all of the houses in the street were leafleted. So there was a great awareness, and if there wasn't much of a response, that probably suggests that people were bothered either way, which is about what the figures show. And the other point is that if any further consultation is to be undertaken, we need to have a full officer's report, so we know that which questions have been answered by the first consultation and which questions remain open.
Councillor Cavanagh, you still want to come in, sorry?
Just a quick observation. I think I agree entirely with Councillor Burke that there needs to be a more comprehensive survey of the residents. I was just thinking to myself, with the statistic in mind, and Martin might correct me on this, is there something like 80% of cyclists are also motorists? So people in Thoday Street, we're putting a lot of pressure on them, aren't we? Those who drive cars and also cycle, are we putting pressure on them to make a decision between a car and a bike? Just worth thinking about when you're asking the question whether or not they support having the extra cycle racks. I mean, I fully support having the cycle racks, and I think there's a lot more cycle racks needed in that whole, what I call the hinterland of Mill Road, particularly near the pubs, because I should imagine the residents are extremely irritated by the number of bikes that are put against the walls of their houses and so on, and the noise associated with it, etc. So Thoday Street, yes, let's see that as a beginning, and let's see the cycle racks being considered in Moore Street, in, as I say, the hinterland to Mill Road?
Councillor Walsh, you still want to come in?
Semi shouting, I'll borrow Councillor Burke's microphone. But if there's a ward that you might most closely compare Romsey with, it's Petersfield. And in March, we've got the car space design being put in permanently outside Kingston Arms and at the top of Mawson Road. The beauty of them being that by repainting the car parking, there's not a single loss of car parking space. I mean, I don't know the context of Thoday Street well enough, and I don't want to speak for the councillors of the ward, but I would certainly encourage any concerned residents certainly to keep it, and I'm sure Martin will be, I think he's over there, so to keep an eye on that, because that's probably the best comparison you're going to get that's being put in at the moment.
Councillor Ward?
Not that much to add. I mean, I said there should be a report. I agree with that. It's getting a bit messy. I don't think it's a good sample. You're talking about the number of responses compared to the number of properties, but if you look at the electoral register, there's a far greater number of people who live there who haven't responded. I think we can do a lot better, get a more representative sample. These numbers are wrong. A couple of these people have been counted twice. I'm sorry, I don't to hand have that detail. The list of people who signed the petition, that's been lost. I didn't have it. To my mind, it's messy. We can get a more representative sample, a clearer picture of what people actually want. And given that, there was a very significant proportion of the respondents to this consultation were people who were sort of drummed up by one local resident who is vehemently opposed to going ahead with anything. Again, without wanting to predict the outcome, I want to be genuine in how we approach this. I would say that we will get a more representative and less skewed sample if councillors go out there and talk to people. Thank you.
A final point, it just seems to me that a lot of this going around in circles would be brought to an end by having full officers' report.
Not necessarily, Simon, but I know what you mean. I mean, the way it works is that a suggestion is put forward, as was in Morton Road. The residents in the vicinity are asked their views. The officer concerned then, sort of assesses those responses, discusses it with the ward councillors, and if there's clearly support for the proposal, then it will go through. Clearly, at the moment, I'm being objective. There's not clear support either way for the proposal on the basis of initial consultation. So maybe it needs to be widened out a bit and repeated. But that's for the ward councillors and the officer concerned to discuss.
Can the committee agree that this should be the first decision to go to the newly reconstituted Area Joint Transport Committee?
I don't think that's
I don't think that's for us to. I don't think that's for us to say, Councillor Burke, really.
If it exists,
Can we have
in the near future.
something?
It's not a decision we're responsible for in this area, I'm afraid. But the point's been raised by Mr Nuttall and will be recorded, and yes, clearly that was taken on board. Martin, do you want to ask a similar question or something different?
Yes, I'd like to follow up on that. Firstly, can I say I think it's inappropriate to have another consultation before an officer report comes forward. It seems to me quite clear you run a consultation, you get to an officer report and then you decide what to do. At the moment, the idea of running a second consultation very much smacks to me of kicking the can down the road, and I'd like to see some leadership in terms of getting this sorted. I have to say, I feel this must be a record county amount of consultation per metre squared. I mean, we're talking about 5 metres squared of Thoday Street. I mean, how much time is this, an officer time and money is this taking? Can we not just get on with it? I'd also like to remind councillors, we're talking about the current balance is 0 cycle parking. That's absolutely none on the street versus the car parking. So we're not talking about sort of taking over. We're saying adding effectively 1 or 2 cars with worth of space. We're not talking about much here. Anyway, so I was looking at these results, and I think it's quite interesting. And I understand this is the corrected results, and this has come from officers. So I hope we can trust in the professionality of our officers. So the first thing it shows is that more than half the people are in favour. And I don't agree with the idea that people who don't live in the area but who still visit the area shouldn't have a voice. I mean, people come to visit houses. It's a very important function of the street. So I think it's entirely reasonable that, for example, I responded. So then we look at the ones against. Well, we've actually got, I would say, some relatively sort of flimsy arguments here. Well, the first one is that residents should use the back alley and put the back bikes in the garden. Well, this request is coming from people whose houses are not designed such that you can actually get round to the back garden. So I think, you know, to accuse them of being lazy is not on really. Secondly, we've got the fear of theft of bikes from racks. Well, as we've already heard, people already leave their bikes outside. At the moment, they do so in such a way that they're forced to leave them on the pavement because of the car parking that's taking up the whole half the pavement. So what we're saying here is there's an improvement on the theft situation, on the security situation, because currently they're doing it in a less secure way. Thirdly, the fear of burglary as students leave bikes over the summer indicating properties are empty. I mean, what, do thieves work out who owns which bike in advance? I don't know. This seems a rather silly argument. Fourthly, personal safety concerns if you have to park the car further away. Well, that already happens. If there isn't a parking space, people park further up the road and walk down. So again, I think that's a fairly weak argument. Pressure of car parking is the next one. And the last one, I'll come back to that. Danger of bike projecting into the road. Well, I mean, that's really just a design matter. You just angle it and the problem goes away. So the last one is the pressure on car parking. And have some figures been circulated? Simon went out last night, in fact. So at 8:40 p.m, when people quite reasonably may be out, of the 83 spaces, 22 were vacant. So already there was a quarter of space. 10:15, 14 car parking spaces were vacant. 11:15 p.m, so you'd expect people to be home by then, 10 spaces were vacant. So an eighth of the spaces, there was already space, you know, that we could reallocate. And in the morning, 16 were vacant. Now, I wouldn't say that yesterday was an untypical day. So I would say of the remaining reasonable arguments that might be assorted to car parking, there's a fairly clear indication that you could actually fit this in. So I would like to propose that we just get on with it, we go to a TRO and stop wasting officers' time, and let's try it out. I mean, we've got 0 cycle parking here. Let's just rebalance it so there's 2 spaces worth and probably still, you know, 79, 80, 81 car parking. So I think that's a fair balance, personally, to start with.
Sorry, Martin, you're in favour of the idea.
I'm strongly in favour, yes.
Yeah,
I think
well,
we should get on with it.
But not being a ward councillor, I'll be objective, and clearly the initial consultation didn't prove conclusively that there was unanimous support for the proposal. So I think that's the dilemma the ward councillors themselves have to...
Perhaps Councillor White come back on.
Councillor Smart, I think, wants to come in.
Yes, 2 things. I don't think the university's back, and therefore not all the postgrads will be back, so your survey may not be quite yet. Perhaps next week we should do it again. Secondly, the officers were unwilling to go straight to a TPO because it was so very evenly balanced. They felt that because TPOs cost money, and that is why we didn't get on straight away with a TPO, because they could see a good chance of losing it, and that would cost money. Hence the pause. Pauses are quite fashionable.
It's TRO, of course, TPOs for trees, but...
Sorry.
Yes. No, that's all right. Easy
You
mistake
knew
to
what
make.
I meant.
We did. Traffic regulation orders for
Traffic reg-
uninitiated.
TRO, yes,
Right.
traffic regulation order. Anyway, we didn't do it because they thought they might lose it, and it costs money. The county ain't got all the money.
That's Councillor Burke, to sum up.
I don't have a whole lot to add. Councillor Smart makes a fairly key point, I think, in terms of parking pressures in Romsey. Life gets a lot more difficult when the university students come back. Thank you for clarifying, Martin, that these are the corrected figures, but I mean, members of the public saw the previous figures, which showed that a slight majority were against the project. Then officers went back, because it became apparent to me that some of them had been counted twice, and said, okay, now a slight majority, very ultra-fine majority are in favour of the project. And by the way, we don't anymore have the names or addresses of all the people who signed the petition against. It just feels a bit messy to me. I'd like to actually put together a clearer picture of what people think. I feel a little bit like I'm being represented as being against this. Well, no, I want to talk to as many people as possible, on Thoday Street before making a decision. I'm very sympathetic to the need for having more cycle parking in the area and improve cycling facilities, and there are lots of examples that I could enumerate to show that. But I also represent all the people in the area, and so I'm going to talk to as many of them as possible before making a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I come back very briefly? I will be brief, don't worry.
Go on then.
So firstly, the point about students being away, well, the university regulations require that people don't have cars.
Postgrads, I said.
Postgrad. Okay, fair enough. I do question how many postgrads really would need to be driving from...
Sorry, but the university doesn't regulate it either.
Right, okay, I stand corrected.
I know that's the case, I follow.
Lastly, you said you were very sympathetic.
Quite please.
Yeah.
Quite please.
Councillor Wood, thank you for saying that you were very sympathetic. Can I just ask you directly, do you support the need for cycle parking in that area? I mean, I've heard a lot about wanting to hear, it's very finely balanced, but I haven't heard your view. Do you want it or not? Are you willing to make leadership to actually do this?
I do think we need cycle parking in the area, and I want to consult people to just have a better picture of what they want as well before I make my decision.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, that's gone through the written submission questions. Are there any questions from members of the audience